Good evening, everybody. My name is John Mappin, and on behalf of my wife and myself, I'd like to welcome everybody here this evening. It's a rather interesting turnout for a dinner for 10, which is what this was originally planned to be. But of course, when people started to hear that Charlie and Candace were coming to town, it expanded significantly. And I'd very much like to thank Peter Southall, who has been extraordinary in sort of rallying the troops, I would say, and also our very good friends, Lord and Lady Plunket, who have been extraordinary in their efforts to help everybody understand what it is that we're trying to do. I would just pass the microphone briefly to His Lordship. I want to say a few words.
I do have a first name, it's Tyrone, so I don't want to totally stand on ceremony. No, I just want to welcome Charlie, welcome Candace. It's very I think there's some irony in that our cousins from the other side of the water coming across to re-educate us on some of the traditional values we seem to have forgotten. And anyway, there is humour in that, and mind you, there's a lot of humour in politics here at the moment, if you can see it. So I just want to say welcome to them, and then welcome to everyone who's made the time to come along here. And clearly anyone in this room is prepared to be open-minded, which it would appear that a very large section of our country are not prepared to be open-minded. And the particular problem that I see, in which Turning Point seems to be making great inroads in the States to changing, is that the majority of our seats of learning are closed to independent thought, free speech, and things that I happen to hold dear. I have two identical sons about to go to university, whether it's in the States or here, I'm not sure at the moment, but it would be nice to think that they had a future where they don't have to be worried about their opinions, and that even if somebody disagrees with them, they don't become aggressive and, you know, as we've all seen how Charlie and Candace get treated back in the States, we don't want that kind of treatment. So anyway, I just want to welcome them here. I hope that some of their ideas catch on here, and it's our job to see that that happens. Anyway, thanks very much for coming.
Well, I think without much further ado, what can I say? Welcome Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens.
Hello, everybody. So glad to be here. For those of you that do not know, Candace and I have been at this for about a year together in the most unusual way imaginable. And just to kind of frame the evening, we believe that Western society as we know it is really at a tipping point or a turning point, depending on how you look at it. And obviously with the Brexit debate going on right now, can go two very, very different directions. And what Candace and I have been doing in the States for really 12, 13 months now, have been committing to fight a culture war. And we believe there's something unique and something exceptional about Western civilization and Western values that we should be unapologetic and unafraid to talk about. So when I was 18 years old, I started this organization, Turning Point USA, out of my parents' garage in Chicago, Illinois. And the great irony of the whole thing is I actually never went to college or university. And I started it just with no money, no connections, and no idea what I was doing. But I like to say it's an only in America success story, where a kid from Chicago with just grit, vision, and work ethic could start something from absolutely nothing, travel the country to meet with business leaders and CEOs, to try to believe in the idea of taking back the American universities and the younger generation around the ideas of free markets and limited government. And in 6.5 years now, Turning Point USA is America's largest and strongest student organization. now present on 1,400 college and high school campuses across the country, well over 120 people on staff, and an annual operating budget upwards of $15 million a year, and with over 35,000 grassroots supporters all across the states, in all 50 states. And that is something so unique to the American experience that just a kid with no experience could get invested in and see the results from that. And then a year ago, at an event, I met this unbelievable talent, Candace Owens. And Candace will tell you a little bit about her story, but when I met her, I knew that she was a total change maker, and that she is someone that believes in the ideas of freedom and liberty. And there's an old expression for those of us that love American baseball. It's, you can't teach talent. And Candace is the greatest embodiment of that. Her charisma, her intellect, her wit, and her capacity to put forth ideas is second to none. And she has exploded onto the international stage over the last year, garnering billions and billions of views and impressions, and is probably the leading ambassador for international freedom that I can think of across the world. And she serves as our communications director and leads a project called, for those of you that don't know, called Brexit, which is the black exit from the Democrat Party, which is kind of fun. So Candace, tell a little about your story. And
Sure. So my story isn't quite as ambitious as Charlie's. I definitely was not starting a company when I was 18 years old. I like to say that I started in the trappings of Black America. I come from a family of extreme poverty, a lot of children out of wedlock. My mother did not graduate high school. She lived in and out of group homes her entire life. And her and my father separated. They should have separated much sooner, but they eventually did when I was in high school. So when I got into college, I took out massive amounts of student loans because, of course, I learned in high school if you don't go to college, your entire life will be a failure. And found myself $150,000 in student loan debt and no degree, because by my senior year, the loan companies had much of a collapse and I couldn't secure a loan for my last year. Didn't care about politics whatsoever. That also is very much by design. Most people are largely ignorant about politics and don't realize that everything that they're experiencing in their lives is in fact because of politics of the past and the future. So I started getting into it, of course, with Donald Trump. He comes down the escalator, and I think everyone in the world paid attention in that moment. If you were not engaged in politics, you at least got slightly engaged when you saw Donald Trump come down the escalator, and he's talking about making America great again. He's offending everybody. The press is up in arms. They're calling him a racist, a sexist, a misogynist. At one point, they went so far as to say he was incestuous and had feelings for his daughter. It got really crazy, really bizarre, really fast. And at that time, I considered myself a Democrat. I considered myself on the left. And I did not want Donald Trump to win. But the differentiator is that I did not think he was a racist or a sexist or a misogynist. I just thought he was ill-equipped for the position that he was running towards. So I thought to myself, is it plausible that racism is being used as a theme to turn Black people into single-issue voters, to scare people into voting a certain direction when you use these terms like literally Hitler? It's their favorite thing to call Donald Trump. He's literally Hitler. He literally is not Hitler, but this is something that they say over and over again because the politics of fear, it really straps people into certain ideologies that do not ultimately serve them. So I had this brilliant idea once I figured it out that I was going to quit my job. I was working in private equity at the time, trying to pay down my loans, and I was going to start a YouTube channel. We do not recommend that for most people, but it was all I had at the moment. I said, maybe if I get my voice out there and I start talking about these issues in a more cultural way, in a more colloquial way, in a way that you would talk to your friend. Maybe if I make fun of them, the left, in the same way they're constantly making fun of us, they're running around with pussy hats on their head. That's really funny. I'll make a video about feminism and how toxic it's become. And obviously the game changed really quickly for me. By my third video, it had garnered 26 million views worldwide. It was dubbed in Portuguese. It was dubbed in French. And it made me realize that I was tapping at the doors of what I thought was just an American sentiment, but perhaps it's a worldwide sentiment that something is not right, that the press is no longer working for the people, and they're just really trying to control the people. And then I met Charlie Kirk, and I guess we like to say the rest is future, because we're certainly creating it.
And we've had so much fun, I have to tell you. And just in the last 13 months, we have seen in America a grassroots revolution brew up from the bottom of young people that are rebelling against what we like to call cultural Marxism. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen this manifest itself. If you have any questions of what that is, just listen to Jeremy Corbyn for like 35 seconds. And that's just essentially cultural Marxism in a soundbite, which is an attack on Western society. Free enterprise is inherently exploitative. The US is a great evil. This is being taught in our universities. And where Candace and I have really struck a chord is we go a level deeper than that, where, and I'm sure this is happening in the UK as well, where victimhood, being a victim, is almost worn as a badge of righteousness. We call this the Oppression Olympics, where there's a competition of who can be the most oppressed victim group. And whoever that person is, they win the award, and they deserve the most amount of stuff.
Free stuff.
That someone else must pay for. And what makes Candace so unique, and where we've had the success over the last 13 months, is given this totally backwards political environment and atmosphere that's been created, black women are not allowed to be conservatives in the States, especially black young women that are outspoken like Candace. And so she goes to these universities, and people, they say, well, Candace, I've never heard someone speak that way. And Candace says, I believe in you. I believe you should be a victor, not a victim. And you can start to see throughout, let's just use France for an example right now, not exactly going well for them.
It's not going well. And this idea of victimhood, it ultimately harms the person that is accepting the status. You know, if you accept that you're a victim your entire life, you'll probably end up giving up a lot of your rights because you've bought into some utopian concept that the government's going to somehow fix it. More government, more government. We will be able to defeat sexism if there's more government and you elect Hillary Clinton, right? You'll be able to defeat poverty if we just have more welfare programs. And of course, if you actually look at what the welfare programs have done, Black America has gotten poorer than we were 60 years ago. The single motherhood rate in my community has jumped from 23% in the 1960s to a whopping 74% today. So more government is not actually fixing the issues, and yet they want me to believe that I need to invest in more of it.
And you see examples of this all across the world. And at some point there is, it becomes mathematically impossible and culturally impossible to support these social welfare programs and continue to expand them. And so France is obviously an easy example to pick, where they take the whole month of August off, basically. They have very, very high tax rates on the rich, so they start to flee the country. And the only way that they can sustain their socialist policies is to try to import millions of people that are adverse to Western values. And so they'll bring in 1 million people from the Middle East that want nothing to do to assimilate. They'll have 6 individuals per family, and they're at complete odds with Western values. And we'll go to a university, and this is labeled hate speech in some universities in the States, and I don't know if we're allowed to say it here in the UK, so I'll definitely say it, which is all men are created equal, but not all cultures are created equal. And we have to stand and exclaim that from the rooftops, that Western society is not compatible with the culture of Saudi Arabia.
That's exactly correct. So, and teaching students that multiculturalism is a utopian concept. It's a myth. There's no practicality behind it. The application of it doesn't work. If one culture believes that the other culture shouldn't exist, or I shouldn't be able to walk around freely, or if I were a gay man, I should be pushed off of a building, that doesn't work with our Western values, and yet we have a society that's trying to tell us that it can work. I mean, one thing that indicates to us that multiculturalism doesn't work is the fact that they have to censor free speech in order to try to accomplish it. They don't want you criticizing it. They don't want you talking about what the implications are, because they know once you allow the debate, you realize that the ideas are flawed.
That's right. And so we're happy to be here and informally announce, because we are going to do it, we do want to launch Turning Point UK, and we have some great allies here. So over the next day, we're very much in the planning stages of doing that. But Candace and I are committed to take the Turning Point success story, not just throughout Europe, but also take it global. And right now, the globalists, they are counting on the European Union as their test model. And this is why Brexit is so important. It's fundamental to the defense of Western society. Because Brussels should not dictate what the laws London passes. It shouldn't. And those of you that have dealt with the EU, you know they're bureaucratic at best and statist control at worst. And so what we want to do is we want to take the success story of America, of what we've done in America, and bring that defense all throughout Europe.
Yeah, I mean, look, we very much believe that we are in the midst of World War III. People always talk about it. When's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? It's happening right now. It is an ideological war. We are fighting for Western values. America represented sort of the last stand, and then Trump came. And now we're turning and understanding that in the past, wars were won when the UK and the USA allied together and fought. And that's what we need to do here.
Absolutely. And so we're going to be back. We're going to be doing a lot more of this. We'd love to take some questions because I know that we've been getting a lot of questions throughout the night, and we'll touch on a variety of different topics. We're just other couple quick facts. Candace and I have a great admiration for President Trump and for the First Family, and we've dealt a lot with him on many different things. And you can't believe what The Guardian says about President Trump. You can take that from someone who's actually been attacked by The Guardian, just so you understand how out of line the British press has become. Not that I need to tell you guys this. They said in the headline of the article that Candace was a neo-Nazi supporter, which last time I checked, Candace was black, so I don't understand how that one works. So they might have something coming for them very soon. But we're very close with the president and the First Family in the States, and we understand this is a global defense for freedom. So I think there's a question.
So the question is about midterms. The Democrats use some pretty bold tactics, obvious ones, and they work pretty well if you look at the women vote and the minority vote. So given that it was obvious and expected, and they had the advantage of all their media, I mean, what are your lessons from that? Patriots lose a game, they take a lesson away. So what are your lessons from?
I don't think either of us considered midterms to be a loss if you look at the traditional arc.
It wasn't bad. I'm just saying
Right.
but those votes didn't, they tipped a lot of House races pretty badly.
Right. So I think a major problem that we have, and I always critique the Republican Party for this, is that we just don't run good candidates. I mean, the problem is that here I am, and we hate socialism, obviously, but when we look at Andrew Gillum next to Ron DeSantis in Florida, and you watch them on stage debating, one of them is charismatic. We're dealing with a population that is largely uneducated. So they're voting on charisma. They're not voting on facts. They don't know what socialism is. They don't know what it did in the past. They don't know what it's doing currently in Venezuela. And that's problematic, is that we're not running strong candidates. So a large portion of what we're doing in 2019 and 2020 is trying to put forth candidates that the RNC can run that are conservative. We should have more minorities running. There's no reason why John James didn't win in Michigan. And a lot of it's because the RNC is not putting enough money behind strong candidates like that. So there's a lot of bureaucratic, messes in terms of the Republican Party. But look, there was some optimistic things that happened for sure. Ron DeSantis did great amongst black women. Do you want to know why? He focused on school choice. That's an issue that matters, and that's what I try to get them to understand. Engaging the minority community is the way to win. There's not a single group of individuals that have been more lied to, more used, and more abused by leftist policies in the black community. Their awakening is the end. It's the end for the left.
First of all, what happened with Kanye West? That one's aimed at Candace. And second of all, the left use very emotive arguments. They say, we're poor and you're rich and we have to take away your money. Whereas I say, I work in a sort of free market think tank, we've got to lower taxes to make the economy more efficient. Those two arguments are on two different levels, if you see what I mean. So how do we make our arguments more emotive and more, connect to young people's values, especially in the UK where almost all young people, it seems, are sort of indoctrinated by Corbyn because he's so emotive and he brings it down to a very human level. Whereas the argument that I make is very economic and sort of a bit more, high values kind of thing.
I'll answer the Kanye part, and then you want to answer? Sure. So for those of you that don't know, a major reason why we had so many wins this year is because Kanye West found my YouTube videos and tweeted that he loved the way that I thought, and that popped a very necessary bubble, the Hollywood bubble. People in Hollywood are not allowed to be conservative, and they pitch these sort of leftist ideas that make no sense because they don't really know much about politics at all. They just want to think that they care about the little guy and don't realize that they're actually harming them. So when Kanye tweeted this, it obviously caused a mass firestorm. We went out, we met with him, and he is a conservative. There's no question about that. And we spent a lot of time with him I personally spent a ton of time with him working on sort of moving the ball forward, especially in the Black community. So in terms of what happened to him when he backed out of politics and says that he feels like he's been used, and I want to be careful with my words here, Kanye learned that you cannot do politics halfway. You can't put one foot into politics and think it works that way. He has a family, he has a fashion brand, and you're either all in or you're all out. So Kanye he did what he did. He served us in a capacity that we're extremely grateful for, but we also want to respect the fact that he needed an out, and we gave it to him. I mean, that's really the most I can really say about that.
So he's still on side then?
Pardon?
Is he still on side? Is he still on your side?
Oh, yeah. Kanye is not a liberal. I mean, Kim talks about that all the time. So they have totally different political beliefs. So
to your second point, one of the rules that is, we as conservatives try to be noble in the way we fight in politics, and to some extent we should be. And for those of you that have seen Candace and myself, we'll be screamed at, things thrown at us. We never retaliate in kind. But one of the things the left does very, very well, and I follow Jeremy Corbyn because it's almost like a manifestation of our U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders. It's as if they're the exact same person, constantly wrong but never in doubt. Is they mercilessly attack our motives. Think about that. It's not that our policies don't work, it's that we don't care, and that conservatives want to put forth these policies so that they can enrich themselves and that they want to exploit people. And for whatever reason, we are very hesitant to attack the motivations of the left. And that's where Candace and I have had a tremendous amount of success, is on fact and on logic, is we have to go after the Jeremy Corbyns as exploiting poor people for political power. And that resonates because they are the wardens of millions and millions of people that are impoverished, to give them just enough to get by, but not enough opportunity to break out of poverty, because they want to continue to exploit as many poor people as possible to stay in political power. This happens all across the world. This is not a uniquely UK concept. In the States, we have the Democrat Party. And the Democrat Party has done this with minority communities and Native American communities over the last 60 years. And so you have to go straight to the next generation and say, Jeremy Corbyn says he cares for poor people, but he himself cares only as long as he gets to maintain political power. If poor people became rich and self-reliant and everybody's wealth increased, maybe they won't be members of the Labour Party anymore, and his power would diminish tremendously. That's the motivation that drives the left. The left, their entire livelihood is built around government apparatus, bureaucrats, laws, regulations. As conservatives, our livelihood is built around family, community, church, fraternity, business, and free enterprise. But for the left, everything they do is to try to grow the power of the state so they themselves can be the philosopher king ruling class. And you have to go after that and not just say we have better ideas, but that they don't actually care about the people they say they care about.
And really quickly, I'll add to that, is that I think has been the differentiator for Turning Point, is that we understand that this war we're fighting is not political, it's cultural. This is a culture war. So a lot of people really stuck up their noses within our own party when we initially flew out to go meet Kanye West. Our hashtag for Turning Point USA is Big Gov Sucks. Like, oh, that's not proper. Why would you say Big Gov Sucks? Well, one, because it does. And two, because when you put Big Gov Sucks on a t-shirt, suddenly the movement becomes cooler and kids are more interested in it. There's a vibe going on these campuses and these chapters that we started that it's very punk rock. You're not allowed to be conservative. Oh, that definitely makes kids want to be conservative, right? Because they're young and it's a youth movement. So understanding culture and how culture works and not sticking your nose up to it is really important. And I think that we do too much of that as conservatives.
One more thing. And so the new paradigm that's going to be created in Western politics is not even conservative versus liberal. It's going to be the ruling class versus the disaffected. And so where Trump succeeded where people thought he couldn't is he brought people out that hadn't voted in 40 years that were disaffected in rural America. And culturally.
That's catchy. Lock her up.
Right. And so the essence of what conservatism is to fight for the rights of all people, especially the disaffected, and to cheer for their livelihood to increase. And the ruling class, if it will, is very corporatist, is to give the laws, the regulations, and the favor to those that are well connected politically. And the fundamental question that we always ask a socialist this: do you trust the government? Now in America, most people say no. I don't know what the answer would be here, but in America, it's almost built into our fabric, the distrust of government. And that's great. We are inherently skeptical of power. And so almost every young American will say, I hate government. And you ask the next question, then why do you want to make that government bigger? And at that moment, they'll say, well, I don't. Well, then you're more conservative or libertarian than you ever thought you could possibly be. So, next question. Where's the mic?
I just wanted to sound a sort of rare positive note in these type of meetings and remind everyone that cultural Marxism was a response to Marxism's failure in the West, not its success. So the originator of cultural Marxism, George Lukács, if you take it starting from there, it was about the fact that Western populations did not rise in revolt and in revolution as Russian populations did. What that's done is put Western Marxism on a totally different path to Eastern Marxism. You don't get the social radicalism around race, gender, sexuality in East European communist countries. Of course you don't. You know, it's obvious. So that's why the East looks so different to the West. It's this strange inversion we've had. They've now swung to social conservatism, whereas we now have the long tail, if you like, of this Western Marxist program. So I suppose my question is twofold. One, could you comment on cultural Marxism as a sign of the left's failure, not its success? And secondly, how do you square the circle with the fact that social conservatism is now associated with authoritarianism in Eastern Europe? And how do we deal with that in terms of our messaging? Because it's such obvious, rich ammunition.
Yeah, I mean, I understand your point, but the cultural Marxist piece, just so everyone understands where it stemmed from, is, yeah, it's rooted in postmodernism, which is an idea that's out of French philosophy. All bad ideas come from France. It's just like, without a shadow of a doubt. It's just, nothing of value have they written in the last 100 years. It's just really a mess. And so it's by Jacques Derrida, and essentially has crumbled, the American university, one singular idea. But the Marxists realized, this is just a short overview for those that don't know, so the original Marxist doctrine was very economic in nature. Bourgeoisie versus the proletariat, so on and so forth. It was economic. And as the 60s and 70s rolled around, the Marxists realized they were losing the economic argument, because neoliberal free trade and free market capitalism was just such a wealth-creating engine for all people that it's very hard for them to continue to convince people. So they went to cultural Marxism, which was actually written by some Italian philosophers back in the 20s and 30s, where they made the idea that we have to have our own cultural identity as Marxists. Essentially, there is no such thing as absolute truth. That's where you get this nonsense about there's unlimited genders, that the Judeo-Christian construct doesn't matter, it's atheist in nature, all those things. And so it has now seeped into most of the Western world, where you get a generation that essentially does not believe in any sort of responsibility and unlimited, quote-unquote, social freedom. And that is why you have such unhappiness amongst young people in the West. But the final point is this, is that the Marxists rebranded themselves, and they want to say, well, we're very tolerant. Well, they're actually the most intolerant people in the world. The leftists that preach tolerance are the most intolerant people in the world. They don't allow us on many college campuses in some parts of the states because they consider us to be, hate speech and too radical, because the left is afraid of other ideas.
And they also know that if we're allowed in the rooms, our ideas just make sense. And they want to prevent that from happening, from people being in the room with us and realizing it just makes sense. So we get a lot of times, particularly a moment that I always think of is UCLA. I think that was probably the craziest college. Yeah, University of California, Los Angeles was probably the craziest university stop that we had. And so we arrived there, and we've got Black Lives Matter protesters, we've got Antifa, we've got a group that I can't really identify that's screaming like no Nazi, no KKK, no fascist USA. And we've got people outside of the door that are playing Beyonce music trying to drown out the sound so we can't talk. Now, of course, we get through it. It was really hard to stay calm and rational, but we get through it. And by the end of it, people came up and were like, you know, it wasn't what I was expecting. Well, it's because what they Google and The Guardian pops up and it says that we're Nazi sympathizers and that we're literally Hitler and that Charlie's a racist. And so they come in with that energy because they've fed into the propaganda. And then, of course, if they sit and they stay, well, what am I saying? Black people don't have to be Democrats. I believe in you. You can do it without government handouts. We can do better for ourselves. We need to become more educated about politics. Well, that's not crazy at all. So the only way that they can win the argument is to shut free speech down, to make sure that we never make it to the universities so that people don't start to think logically.
Could you comment briefly on the idea of bastard capitalism, which is that the large corporates have appropriated these cultural Marxist tools and messages, A, to dress themselves in sort of moral clothing, but B, to kind of reach consumers and in a way to fragment society down to the level of more perfect consumers. You know, we see this everywhere. Banks, Dove soap, it's absolutely coming down from the listed corporates.
Right, so this is essentially the corporatist cartel that is catering to the very kind of cultural identity that they want to create in society. And in essence, so there's a lot of different ways I can answer this. Here's the easiest way, is that the radicalism that you see on the universities is not just contained to the universities. It's now stemmed into corporate structure, into governance of business and finance, and so on and so forth. And so we call it, the campus has now come to Congress, is what we call it in the United States, which is these horrifically bad ideas that are considered so radical and just so hard to even swallow are now becoming more and more mainstream because of the people that want to see the destruction of Western civilization. So.
I want to ask, I come from the completely different stratosphere. I'm an artist and musician, and I think that's the reason why I was pretty much invited here today, because most of my friends, colleagues, are on that side of the field, and I know that that's the side of the field that you want to push over. And one of the things that, I think one of the biggest things that I've always had when I've moved from left to right, or across, or whatever, however I am, is the environment. And I always wonder whether, when I listen to conservatives in America, one of the big things is that they don't seem to address it head on. It's not like it's not addressed, but it's kind of like, for many people who are caring about the planet, they care about all these
I'm
things.
the stereotype that you're talking about. Like when people ask about the environment, I'm like, next question, I don't really care about it. The greatest reason for that is what's playing out in France right now. Okay, so because at the end of the day, when you start putting those issues first, those social issues first, and you say we need an answer on the environment, no, we need an answer on the economy. Okay, that is so far down the line in terms of what people are going to care about. So France, he hikes the gas prices up to, what was it, 10.18 per gallon, because he wanted to help for the environment. And what happened? What's happening in France right now? That's not going to be on the list of 10 things that a family cares about before they're going to revolt. I promise you the environment's not going to be there. But it is an issue that the left has seized, and they've blown it completely out of proportion in terms of talking about, the Paris Agreement, which is an absolute disaster. I mean, I'm so happy. It was one of the big wins was Trump pulling out of that, which was just extracting dollars from us. And there was actually nothing that they could do to fix the problem whatsoever. There was nothing proposed. It was just an idea, a feeling they were selling, that if we all band together and tax our citizens, we'll fix the environment. So I almost feel that the environmental issue has become a mechanism for the government to grow and to keep people emotional.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I was just wondering whether, imagine if you're a college kid, you're 19, 20 years old, you're smoking dope, and you ask somebody, what do they care about? They care about the environment. It's one of those things that it is the first thing. And I'm just wondering about how do you emotionally connect to these people, because you can say something logical to them, but something like that never disappears from them. And I'm just wondering whether if conservatives came in with another angle.
Sure, I mean, so there's three ways.
And offered like a solution for the Paris Accord, for example.
Well, yeah. So first of all, the number one polluter in the world is the U.S. federal government. So if you want to stop pollution, curb back the size of government. That will really make socialist Marxists' heads explode. The second thing is the number one oil spill in the States over the last 15 years is actually done by the very agency that was supposed to protect us. It was done by the Environmental Protection Agency in the Colorado River that had millions of metric tons of pollutants put into the Colorado River, and no one was held accountable, no one was fired. You guys remember what happened when BP had 1/10 of the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico? Lawsuits, out the window, international crisis. When a government pollutes its own citizens, no one is held accountable. The third thing is this, is that the irrational war on fossil fuels from the American left and the international left hurts poor people the most. Because it's the elites that can afford rising utility rates. It's the elites that really don't look at the pump when they're filling up their gas with another liter of gas. America is now energy independent. For the first time in American history, America is now exporting more oil and liquefied natural gas than ever. The left under Obama, he did everything he possibly could to stop exploration. The three most, if you rank fossil fuels, the cleanest is liquefied natural gas. And we're getting even better as far as the carbon emissions for that. The United States is like 2 times Saudi Arabia of natural gas. The left wants to keep it all in the ground. It's in the plank and the platform of Jeremy Corbyn. It's in the plank and the platform of Bernie Sanders. And because, with Candace's point, they want to use this radical religious component of environmentalism, it's almost become a religion to go against free enterprise and to go after free market capitalism. And if you actually care about the development of the third world, you should try to build as many coal-fired power plants as you possibly can. They cannot build them fast enough in Indonesia and Singapore and in Cambodia and Laos and India, because when you have a power plant, you have a hospital, you have a school, you have a mechanism to bring people out of absolute poverty. And quick and access to fossil fuels allows to do that. And then the final point is this, is that outside of the Paris Climate Accord, the United States is now independently, we're now at the lowest carbon emissions that we've been in the last 40 years, outside of the Paris Climate Accord, because of innovation and free enterprise advancement.
That's what I was going to say. Innovation and free enterprise is the solution, investing in young scientists and people that have new ideas about how to conquer the environment, not investing in government. There's not a single government program that runs efficiently. Not a single one. When I ask people, name one that you think runs really well, they're silent, because they're all terrible. It's just a means to extract dollars. So if we want to start looking for viable solutions, we have to start looking at innovative free market capitalist ideas and turning to people that have an interest in science and the environment to have them come up with solutions.
Yeah, so in the current age, I feel like the political debate stems around nationalism and globalism, which, however, they're weaponized within the media. I feel especially in Europe, and in America, these movements are being energized. Do you feel the momentum will last? In regards to the EU, Guy Verhofstadt referred to his base of the movement as the summer of populism, in quotation marks. But 2 years down the line, these governments are realizing there's a clear trajectory in the opposite, like against the status quo. How do you feel like the long-term prognosis is for these particular movements?
Well, at least the American media is doing everything they can to poison the term nationalism. Just like any idea, there's good nationalism and bad nationalism. If your nationalism is rooted on very good ideas and defense of common law and free enterprise, then yeah, sign me up for a nationalist for the UK or the United States. The idea of a nation state is so fundamental to a functioning society. Never forget that there has been the creation of trying to assimilate nations by force has led more mass casualty than almost any other global elitist trend over the last 100 years. Whether it be post-World War I structuring that led to World War II, whether it be the Soviet bloc or the colonization of certain African nations. The idea that the elites can put forth arbitrary borders in Iraq, for example, which led to the complete and total arbitrary segregation of the Kurds, the Shias, and the Sunnis, will lead to more casualty than the protection of independently created national sovereignty, of which we are very, very big proponents, obviously, of. Now, the globalists don't believe that. They look at the EU. They're doing everything they can to erode national identity, to unify the currency, to destroy any sort of independent language or linguistic capacity to communicate. And this should be a huge fear to any of us that believe in freedom. Because as soon as they can control 9 different nations, they will impose absolute statism independently, quickly, and dramatically. And that's why we were so enthused by Brexit, but now a little worried that the elites are doing everything they can to thwart the will of the common man of Britain.
Yeah, I agree. I actually don't have any problems at all with the word nationalism. I think that it gets, the definition gets poisoned by elitists that actually want globalism. Globalism is what I don't want. So when you think about, whenever we say nationalism, the first thing people think about, at least in America, is Hitler. You know, he was a National Socialist, but if Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, okay, fine. The problem is that he had dreams outside of Germany. He wanted to globalize. He wanted everybody to be German, everybody to be speaking German, everybody to look a different way. That's not, to me, that's not nationalism. In thinking about how it could go bad down the line, I don't really have an issue with nationalism. I really don't. I think that it's okay. It's important to retain your country's identity and to make sure that what's happening here, which I think is incredibly worrisome in terms of the decrease in the birth rate that we're seeing in the UK, is what you kind of want to avoid. So I don't have anything I have no problems with nationalism. It's globalism that I try to avoid.
So yeah, my question is on how you touched upon the idea of campuses and the growth of the left-wing movement on campuses in the US, and I think how that's now come sort of a movement, especially with Jeremy Corbyn's growth in the UK. The university I'm at in London, the LSE, is very much at a tipping point, as it were, between a movement towards conservatism and a movement towards left-wing ideals. And more it seems to be that I've discovered that the left-wing ideals have been taking more of a priority and more of a standpoint. So with the fact that we have, as we touched upon before, the emotive leadership of somebody like Jeremy Corbyn on the left, what is the best way in which conservatism can start to take back a relevance in university campuses? And how does conservatism, especially in the UK, start to reconnect with a core base in which, in many cases, it's lost?
Culture, 100%. The left won the culture war. That's the problem. I don't obviously watch much TV, but I'm assuming everything on TV is leftist here as it is in America. All the late night shows are leftist. They're mocking conservatives, and they've been able to sort of diminish what it means to be a conservative. People think conservatives are old, rich white men that want to return to the old order of America where there was slavery. I mean, and that's wrong. But because they've been able to yield culture for so long, they're able to brainwash people into believing this. It's so important that we fight the culture war. When I first got started on YouTube, a criticism that came towards me was that I was like a dumb girl. She's making 4-minute videos on YouTube, and she's making fun of people and laughing, but this is not, this isn't serious. That's not what conservatism is about. Why isn't she writing long-form essays? Well, because kids aren't going to watch long-form essays. They're going to they're watching YouTube videos in between classes. If you can make it funny and appealing, then they say, oh, that's cool. That's what I want to do. And it has to be a youth movement. If you're going to protect the future of any country, it has to be a youth movement. We know what the youth likes to rebel. Right? And right now, the thing to rebel against is this growing leftist ideology. So we always point to culture and try to remind people that politics is downstream from culture, which is something that Andrew Breitbart said.
And so to reinforce that, Candace and I will be going to the front lines of universities here in London and across the UK. And there will be retaliation, there'll be protest, but you will see that it takes individuals to go straight into the fire to spark a movement. And we've seen it in the States. We have hundreds of thousands and millions of followers now. Just to give you an idea of the scope of what we've been able to do, next week we're going to be in Palm Beach, Florida, and all of you are invited to this, by the way, by any long shot that you want to come to the US and actually see a grassroots youth movement. We're going to have well over 3,500, 4,000 students from all 50 states come down on their own dime to Palm Beach, Florida to receive the training and to get fired up and energized and the connection. But it's built around culture. It's built around challenging these very simple ideas that have seeped into the culture. And so we want to do that here in the UK. And a lot of it also is there is a silent majority of people that support your ideas, but because of what we call the fascist left, it becomes impossible for people to speak their mind. And so in the US, we joke around, on US campuses, you cannot wear a Make America Great Again hat without having some sort of physical retaliation done against you, just because they dominate the university so much.
Yes, and I'll just add, we've also been able to harness the power of social media, the new technology, and realizing that people love the tweets, being able to smack down a leftist on Twitter. They live for that, It makes them feel like we're winning and we're fighting, and because we have better ideas, and we're not afraid to punch back. So I think that that's something that Charlie and I have done. So we repurpose the footage. We might be in a room with 400 kids on a university, but the reason why we have cameras and we say, if you have a disagreement, come to the front of a line, is because we're waiting for a leftist to come up and say, Charlie, you're a racist, and Candace, you're a Nazi. And because we repurpose that footage, we turn it into these 1-minute clips, and it goes viral, and it gets millions of views. So then who's watching that? The generation beneath that is watching that, and they say, do I want to be the girl with purple, pink, and yellow hair that was calling everybody a racist and looked like a big baby, or do I want to be the people that were poised on stage and able to debunk the arguments ideologically? So that's really what it's about.
I think it's highly laudable that you've come here to launch your movement in the UK. I have two questions for you. The first is, how can we in this room help you? And the second is, how much success do you think you're going to have in a country where it appears that the political establishment has come to view the people of this country as dependent on it, rather than as shareholders who actually own the state that they live in?
Wonderful question.
Yeah.
Brilliantly said. So I'll start with how you can help. So we're in the next day, we'll have a very formalized plan of how we're going to go about the implementation strategy. There's 3 or 4 youth activists here that we plan to meet with tomorrow, and to bring our proven methodology of campus organizing and activism here to the UK. And there's already some energy and some infrastructure and some great digital work that's already being done here. And with that, of course, we'll take resources and capital, and we're not here to ask for money, but that will be needed at some point. And John and many people in this room have already volunteered to be points of contact there. Secondly, we want to hit this very quickly, when Candace and I want to come back in February and hit 3 to 4 universities here in the UK. And when we say we don't shy away from controversy, put us at Cambridge. Right? We want to the most controversial, the most protests you can get, because we will highlight, isolate, and debunk the radicalism in 30 seconds or less. And that will spread viral quicker than you could possibly imagine. And you will have people from the countryside, from Scotland, Northern Ireland, come out of the woodwork wanting to start more chapters, and that's how it's really going to start. And what's the other thing? We Americans, we don't like to lose. Now, I know you guys might think, Americans are cocky and all that. I'm going to tell you right now, we don't go about anything unless we believe we can succeed. And Candace and I, we have been very successful over the last 13 months, and we want to enter this with humility and to try to learn as much about the UK current political culture, but we're going to come after this with a orientation towards success and victory. And having done it for 6.5 years now, we know some of the traps and some of the pitfalls, but we also are here to learn from some of the cultural elements that we're not yet here to come and haven't seen yet. So Candace, you want to comment on that at all?
No, just totally agree with that we think we can do it. We're largely optimistic. So many people come up to us and they say, you guys are so brave, you're so brave. We're not brave. Brave was our boys who landed on the beaches of Normandy. They were brave. With odds completely against them, and they won a war. And that's what we're doing. We're here to fight a cultural war, and we feel that we can win.
My question has been, you've been talking about how you're going to integrate through the universities and colleges, but obviously this movement is way beyond just the student population of what I imagine you want to achieve. So Candace, for example, the community that you grew up in, what's your strategy to actually infiltrating your message amongst different cultures and different societies other than just the student population?
That's correct. So that's why I launched Blexit, which is a movement directly aimed at the Black community. And I have a tour this year, a Blexit tour, which I'll be on the HBCUs, which which they're historical black colleges and universities, and in neighborhoods, like in the backyards of these politicians, having rallies with black people that are just open to new ideas. Because what we've realized is that the black community is extremely fatigued. They know something's not working. It's been 60 years of leftist policies. It's been 60 years of telling us that we should hate the rich, and somehow we're not getting richer by hating the rich. So realizing that these communities are ripe for new ideas and going into them is what my Blexit movement is about separately. I always say that Turning Point is one vertical of what I see as leading a black exodus against the Democrat Party, which I believe that I can move it 20 points, the vote 20 points by 2020. Just so you guys understand, the left relies on the black vote like you wouldn't believe. If they won 85% of the black vote in 2020, they would lose. They have to win more than 85% of the black vote every time, and they do. Hillary won 89%, so we're talking about swinging this 5 points. And like I said, when you speak to a community and you're from it, they listen more, and they're willing to listen. We're seeing that now. For those of you that don't know, despite calling him a racist, plausibly, 1,217 times a day, black support for Donald Trump has doubled in the last year. So him producing results and us going into communities with a message separate from the universities, because the problem is that a lot of those minorities never even make it to university, is what my Blexit movement is all about.
And so one quick comment on this. The left in the UK and the US, but the UK especially, their two big entry points have been labor unions / bureaucracies, government service workers, and the universities. That's really where they build their legions and their activists. And so even if, and this is why the opposition to what we're going to do here is going to be fun. Because if anyone dares challenge their monopoly on the university students, that's a political threat to the Labour Party, like instantaneously. Like, oh my goodness, what if Charlie and Candace and Turning Point UK and all the amazing patriots in this room are able to win another 15,000 converts? That all of a sudden is a huge threat. And so that's where we find the most amount of interest. Because if you can win someone when they're young, when they're 19 or 20, into a conservative, they will be a conservative for life. And it's the great Winston Churchill, who, by the way, I say this a lot, he is the greatest man to live in the 20th century, without a shadow of a doubt. The greatest man to live in the 20th century. And he's totally misrepresented in a lot of culture and a lot of media, had said, if you're not liberal when you're young, you have no heart, and if you're not conservative when you're old, you have no brain. I'm sure you've all heard that many times. That's actually, we probably hear that at least once a week back in the States. And boy, does the UK need a Churchill right now, not a Neville Chamberlain.
And what the universities in particular really hate about me and Charlie, they're in a weird pickle now because of our celebrity. Everything we tweet becomes the news. So when Chicago wouldn't let us speak, where were we? DePaul University wouldn't let us speak. I sent one tweet about it, and it became news. And suddenly the university had to answer for why they weren't letting us speak, and they were forced. Everyone's paying attention. Why aren't you letting conservatives speak? Why aren't you letting them get their ideas out? So we are able to apply a lot of pressure just by our social media presence. Everything that we tweet garners tens of thousands of views and instantly becomes a story. And they don't like that. They want to censor speech, but they want to do it privately. And they're not able to do that when there are big names coming on their universities and the press is showing up.
I don't know whether it's relevant, but Barack Obama, of course, had Churchill's bust removed, didn't he, from the Oval Office?
Yeah, so Barack Obama hated the idea of Winston Churchill, and he took his bust right out of the Oval Office, and day one, Donald Trump put it right back in. And Candace and I have seen it, and we smiled next to it and posed next to it. And
well, fancy that. It's great to see and hear you. You've talked a lot about the politics of power and debunking, and that makes good sense. If you like, it's the how. And you talk about culture, but underpinning culture really is the human condition. And as a medic, which is what I am and was, I'm very interested in what makes people tick. And the thing that appeals to me is the grounding, if you like, of culture, and a successful culture, in the psychology of people. We talked briefly beforehand about Jordan Peterson. I'm sure he's one of several psychologists who've provided the science, perhaps, that underpins your inspiration. When you're going to universities, these bright young minds, I presume, will be pushing you for reasons and drilling down. What do you say to that? And is this something that you actually sort of depend on or try to push?
The answer is yes. And so if I had to boil it down even more than anything else, we have a behavioral psychology disagreement with the left. The left believes that with enough government force, they can get rid of hierarchies. Okay, so what is a hierarchy? A hierarchy is that some people are going to be better at some things than other people. And so they believe that they can create an egalitarian utopia by righting the wrongs of the exploitative society. And that's what's inherent in Marxism, is that you must take from those that have it and give it to those that don't. Cultural Marxism is even worse, is that there's no difference between men and women. That's essentially what they teach now in many, many universities across the West. And science will tell you that is fundamentally not true. And what Jordan Peterson offers is a multi-million year analysis that, going back in the Darwinian process of evolution, hierarchies are embedded in animals, going far back to lobsters. And that's kind of the joke that people always give with Dr. Jordan Peterson, is that lobsters are his favorite animal. Because even in lobster colonies, they have hierarchies. There are some lobsters that win the duels and they end up being the leader of these colonies. And there's a direct line from our evolutionary background from lobsters all the way down to human beings. So what does this mean? It means no matter how much government force and centralized planning the left tries to put forth, they cannot perfect imperfectible vessels. And if you admit that human beings are broken by nature, of which Candace and I do, then you must fight for a system that requires the individual to act in a virtuous way in order to be productive. And that's the free enterprise system. It's very hard to be massively successful while you lie, cheat, and steal all the time. Very, very difficult. You have to treat your employees well. You have to come up with a good idea. You have to pay your vendors on time. You can't borrow reckless amounts of money without paying it back. It requires virtue. In fact, it breeds virtue, where socialism does the exact opposite. To be successful in a socialist state, you run for office, you lie, you exploit the masses, and you repeat, cleanse, and repeat. And so if you come from the orientation that human beings are broken by nature, of which Candace and I do, there's only one system of governance and economics that supports that, and that is a free enterprise system supported by common law and constitutional government.
Thank you.
One more question.
Have you got any plans to target the left-wing bias in social media through like Facebook?
Okay, so yeah, this is really great. So first off, there is a new Twitter on the horizon called Parler. Like French like to talk, P-A-R. No, it was really crazy. So I met the guy by chance like 3 weeks ago, the guy behind it, and I had seen, a lot of conservative platforms, come to this instead, but nothing that really got me excited that I thought had the potential to take over Twitter or these giants. And this person, what he built was absolutely amazing to me, and it's in the early phases. You can download the app now. It's Parlay News. So last week, I'm in the Fox News green room getting ready for Judge Janine's show, and Charlie and I are going on together. And I mentioned to Charlie, I'm like, Charlie, download this now. They're not launching until February, and there are kinks, but grab your handle at Charlie. You can and I want to be at Candace. And suddenly, 48 hours later, from word of mouth in Fox News, it blew up overnight. We crashed Parlay News, and the founder was like, "Who did you tell?" And I said it in the green room. Yes, to go back to your question, we are going to have to make a leap. The power is always in the hands of the people. So we are letting them censor, and we know what's going on for people that didn't. I think the most alarming thing that happened this year in terms of social media censorship was Alex Jones, and I'll tell you why. Alex Jones was not just censored. He got censored on the very same day by YouTube, Facebook, and Apple. That means that these companies are colluding, okay? It would have been less alarming if it was, 1 month he got kicked off of Facebook. It means that they had a conversation. They realized that he has a massive following, and he does, whether people love him or hate him. He has a massive following. And his censorship, to me, was the most alarming thing. But how do you win? Are we going to whine and cry and say, Twitter removed my check mark, and, they deleted my tweet? Or are we going to all migrate to a platform? Twitter is successful because of conservatives, because of Donald Trump tweeting, okay? Because of people like me and Charlie tweeting, because we have high retweet ratios. If all of us flock and migrate to another platform and it's actually built well, that's how we defeat the companies. They need to have an audience, they need to have users. So Parlay News is it for Twitter. I don't know about Facebook. Facebook is actually in a weird predicament now because now the left hates them too. They've kind of... Yeah, they're in a weird state right now, so they're interesting to watch. But I think it's a very important argument because the reason Donald Trump won is because he was able to get around the mainstream media, and the reason why the left wants to censor all of these platforms is because they realize that it allows us to say the Guardian lies. It doesn't matter. We're going to go on social media and we're going to have conversations and we're going to share relevant news. They want to stop that. They want to return to a world where you pick up the New York Times and you take it as Bible, where you read the Guardian and you take it as Bible. They want to make sure that they are the only source of information. But yeah, that's my answer. We definitely have to all migrate, and Parlay News, you guys download if you're on Twitter. They're going to be launching in February, but it's a terrific platform, and I think that they can totally change the game.
No, I just wanted to say I hope UK will let you back in, because I don't know if you heard about Lauren Southern.
Look, I'm going to tell you right now. That's not going to end well for them.
Sorry. No, because I don't know if you heard about Lauren Southern, a right-wing Canadian activist, was stopped from entering the UK because she was deemed not to be conducive to the public good. So,
well, they won't do it with us. I mean, we're way too close to the White House. If that happens, the president's going to come on Air Force One and say, "Where's my Candace? Where's my Candace?" That won't happen with us. But I will say, I'm against just provocative sense of politics for provocative, sake. I know that I think Lauren Southern went into a Muslim neighborhood and with like Allah is gay signs, and probably not the best way for us to win. I really think that we have to have a better argument. Having discussions that are meaningful on college campuses and winning in that way is better. She shouldn't have been banned. I mean, it's insane that she got banned. Absolutely that she got banned. But we see a lot of this happening in the conservative movement where people get kicked off of a platform and we're like, well, this could have been avoided if we weren't just being provocative for the sake of being provocative, because we have better ideas. We don't need to provoke anybody. They're going to be provoked by us just saying there's two genders. That's a fact, a biological fact, right? So we don't need to go the extra mile to see if we can upset people to start a conversation. We just need to stick to the facts, and that's how we win, in my personal opinion.
You've told us this evening about some of your plans for the UK, mirroring some of the great, fantastic work that you've done in the States. My question or point is fairly simple. One of the major differences between the UK and the US is that we do not have a Donald Trump. What is your response to that point?
Yet.
Yet.
What's happening? I mean, look what's happening.
Yeah, and so look, I'm going to let Candace just brought a great point, so I want to make her comment on it. But you have to understand that Donald Trump was a movement that was 40 years in the making. And I could do an extended speech about this, but the conservative movement, for those of you that have been fighting in the trenches for 30 years, it went from Goldwater to Reagan to Ross Perot challenging H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton to the Tea Party movement in opposition to Barack Obama. That Donald Trump, yes, he's a once-in-a-generation type charismatic. He is relentless. It's his greatest attribute. He is relentless, and his work ethic is second to none, and his patriotism is just right to the core. But there was a well-funded conservative movement in place of pro-life groups, of pro-Second Amendment groups, of state Republican parties, of donor groups that were already synergized, that when Donald Trump came and he won that nomination, they said, all right, now we're ready to bring you to the presidency. And a lot of that infrastructure proved to be consequential in states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. What's my point? Is that you can't just hope for a British Donald Trump, because you need an infrastructure behind that. You need a grassroots machine. You need a social media response to the Labor Party. And Donald Trump deserves the credit of the impossibility of winning against the Bush machine, against the Clinton machine, and the media machine. But it was also a 40-year battle against the left that made some of it possible.
And I will say that there's a natural domino effect, so I like that he said the word yet, because Donald Trump created Candace Owens. There was no black conservative voice going after the black vote saying we can do it, but because I saw Donald Trump and he said it, and I was so shocked and it was so disruptive, it woke me up, and then I became, Xena warrior princess for the conservative cause. And 2 years ago, I was a liberal. Look at how invested I got into this, because that's how much it mattered once I felt like the wool was pulled over my eyes. So that energy is going to happen here too. So maybe Donald Trump starts in America. He creates Candace Owens. Charlie Kirk's just, I don't know, 18 and too ambitious. But and we come to the college campuses, and you're somebody's going to rise up in that. They're going to say, oh my gosh, they said it first, but I really believe in this, and this is something that we need to bring home. And I totally believe that you're going to see someone, rise to the top of the ranks very quickly out of nowhere. Donald Trump had no political background, and he won the U.S. election and defeated the entire mainstream media and two establishment families, the Bushes and the Clintons.
And remember, it was a whole group of characters that brought forth Maggie Thatcher. It wasn't just her. I mean, she was she was once in a generation type leader. But the intellectual support from the Bill Buckleys of the world, and the support domestically in the States with Ronald Reagan, and so it takes many, many years to get that put forth. But the cool thing is things move faster today than ever before because of social media. Candace Owens, 18 months ago, was not involved in politics at all. Now she's a thermonuclear weapon against the left on 6 continents.
First of all, guys, if either of you want to run for Prime Minister in this country, you're more than welcome. We'd all be supportive. First of all, congratulations, Charlie and Candace, on your success so far. It's really, really inspiring, and we're hoping that we can replicate something like this over here. And I know I can speak for most people in this room to say we're at your service. I want to pick up on what Stephen asked, which was he asked you about how you frame arguments. My question is, do you think you should also we should be careful on which topics we discuss with people or focus on more? The reason is because young people on campuses, they're not paying taxes, right? So to talk to them about that might be tricky, whereas identity politics might be something you focus on more. So the question, because if you're a straight white male, you're being attacked when you go onto campus, and you can relate to those arguments. So the question is, are there topics that are better to focus on than others, in your opinion, and ones to shy away from?
No, so we let them create a line, and they bring the topics to us. They'll let us know what they care about. We're just prepared to answer and deconstruct all of their non-arguments within a span of 30 seconds.
Make them punch first.
Yeah, make them punch first. We're not going to tell them what they have to care about. What they care about is what they care about. We know we're going to hear some stuff about the environment. We know we're going to hear, Candace, how could you, as a black woman, and just being ready to drive the point home and repurposing it. But 100%, we don't go in with a plan. We've never once written a speech. We had nothing planned to come up on stage. We just go up there and we speak, and we feel the room, and we allow people to tell us what matters to them. And that's really important.
And we see similarities, and here's the really cool thing, is that Candace and I were well-versed in a lot of topics, but sometimes we hear about topics we're unaware of. But when you're rooted in timeless principles, you have answers to everything. So we might not know about like the waterfowl migratory problem in northwest Northern Ireland, okay, some obscure topic. But we do know that private property rights work and that markets solve problems and entrepreneurs are modern day heroes. So we can approach any sort of problem, and we're also against identity politics and in favor of free speech. And so there's nothing that the left can throw at us that we cannot counter. And it really helps because it gives them the first platform to put forth their ideas. So we'll sit back and we'll say, tell us what you believe. And they'll say, communism is a great idea. Okay. How's that been working for you? 100 times it's been tried over the last 100 years, 100 million people dead. Everywhere it's been tried, it has failed. They've never been countered with that sort of. So that we have the principles and we back it up.
Yeah, just a quick story. One of my favorite moments on college campus this year was obviously in the heat of the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, and these kids were really fired up, and we went out, and I was wearing a #HimToo shirt in response to the radicalized Me Too, because why not, right? So I'm standing on stage, and of course this guy steps to the mic, and he's like, Candace, how could you as a woman not believe women when they say that they were sexually assaulted? I just don't understand that. And I said, okay, let's try it your way. You sexually assaulted me. And he was like, what? I was like, you sexually assaulted me. You just have to believe me, and everyone in the room starts getting riled up. Would you want everyone to just believe me? Should you be convicted? I said it, I'm a woman. And being able to do that, to take their argument and say, okay, let's try it your way. Let's do it the way you want to live. Just believe everything I say that comes out of my mouth, and I'll just go around and tell you what all of you guys have done to me. And that's what you have to do. And then he was like, no, I didn't sexually assault you. And I'm like, my point has been proven. That's how we try to fight these ideas on college campuses, is let their ideas fly, and then they realize they don't really want that world that they're fighting for.
One question, please. Corbyn has made it clear that he'd like to lower the voting age to 16. Now, it sounds to me like that, I don't know for a fact, but the age you're talking to at universities is slightly older than that. So we have an issue here. Would you be prepared to be talking to kids that are much younger?
Without a doubt. By the way, that's one of the worst ideas I could possibly imagine, to lower the voting age. So fight against that at all costs.
He's basically saying we want people whose brains aren't developed to be able to vote. That's what he's basically saying. He's saying they get smarter with time, they have responsibilities, they realize how things can go. So we need people, let's just have 8-year-olds voting. I mean, that's really what they're doing. They're dialing back the age, because even by 18, you're at university. You have a little bit of experience because you're out of your mother's house. And you really still live in a utopia world when you're 16 years old and everything's paid for and you just go home and mom's got dinner on the table. That really infuriates me.
And so, by the way, with Jeremy Corbyn, please, I'd love to be part of this, call him the anti-Semite that he is, for goodness sakes. We would excommunicate him from American politics. He would not be allowed to serve, he would not be allowed to walk the streets of Manhattan with what he said against the Jewish people. And the fact, it's disappointing.
Yeah.
It's disappointing that it is tolerated. He is a blatant anti-Semite. And we don't use these lightly. We don't call people that unless they really warrant it. But his code of conduct, his behavior, and his speech time and time again is anti-Semitic. So please, just every day, just say, you mean the anti-Semite Jeremy Corbyn? Just say it in every single pattern of language and sentence.
Trump is brilliant at that. Talk about a culture war. He will brand it. You lying Ted. Hillary, you'd be in prison. Lock her up. Little Marco. These things stick into people's minds, and they start to associate that. So sometimes it really is. Yeah, a Jew hater, Jeremy. You say these things, and people start to go, "Oh my gosh, this person is this," and they start to look for it. So I really do believe that a major reason that Hillary lost is because Donald Trump was using nicknames for everybody.
I want to say one thing to close it up. So great things happen when Americans and Brits get together for a common cause. And we couldn't be more honored and thankful for all of you to take your time tonight to learn more about what we're doing. But we didn't just come here to give a speech. So Candace and I, we are pundits, we are spokespeople, but we are committed activists too. And we can't allow the left just to control that term activist. So we want to bring this to the UK. And so there's a variety of ways you can help. Again, we're not here to ask for capital, but that will be needed somewhere down the road. So if that at all interests you, or you're in a position to learn more about that, you could talk to John or some of our other very good friends in the room. And we will be back bringing this message all across the United Kingdom and then Europe. I have books there that two of my bestsellers are there. Please take one. I want to leave empty-handed. And we'd love to have you, read the book and learn more about what we're doing. But again, we couldn't be more thankful for your time. And this is a time that 50 years from now, we'll remember this 5-year window. We'll remember what happened. It could have gone one way or the other. And Candace and I have dedicated our lives to make sure that a free society and Western civilization is preserved and defended. So, thank you so much.
Well, Plunket, do stay here, sir. Tyrone, I just wanted to really, I think I'm speaking for all of us. We thought long and hard. I know that there are many, many people in this room who feel as passionately as we do, and we wanted you to have a little memento of your visit to London. And so we organised this typically English, this is from Smythson, which is a sort of an English printing.
Yeah, we have it in New York.
Oh, they probably have one in New York. There you go. Well, there you go. And what this is if anybody would like to put a little message to Candace and Charlie for coming here and how they really truly feel about this evening. And if they want to be contacted in the future, they can put their contact details in it. It'll be on the table on the way out with plenty of pens. And if you'd just like to make a little note in it as to how you feel about this evening, sometimes the more conservative of us put our thoughts into words better than we do, on stage. But it's been very, very emotional for me personally.
Give it up for John.
And yes,
I just want to say I am so impressed by the fact that you answer the questions so cleverly, and your confidence, I hope, will spread amongst everyone here. So you just need to sprinkle a little of that stardust here, and we hope it grows. So yeah, well done to both of you. For two kids who haven't been to university, you're not selling universities very well. But anyway, I'm going to tell my kids later they can get even better than you. Right, here you go.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's have another round of applause for... Thank you so much. Well, let's put it on the table. The book will be on the table out there. If anybody wants to write, it's like a guest book idea.